Good morning. I am grateful to be here with you all today and have the chance to tell our shared value story about how, in a surprising way, not only is this approach really as a business strategy helping us to navigate a disruptive time in our industry, but it's also allowing us to do a lot of good in the meantime. So what I want to do is give you a brief overview of Redwoods, who we are and what we do, tell you a bit about what's going on in the wonderful world of insurance that we live in, and then go deep into a live example of how we're working to provide insurance services to foster care agencies. And in doing so, both create a lot of impact and also find our way through a time where disruption is headed directly towards us. So at Redwoods, we are a mission-driven insurance company, and shared value is really inherent in our DNA. We insure child-serving nonprofits, so YMCAs and Boys and Girls Clubs. And let me see if I can get the clicker to work. It is, there we go. Sorry about that. So we insure child-serving nonprofits, and as their insurer, that gives us what amounts to a treasure trove of data about how kids and how people get hurt in these programs. Every year we analyze over 40,000 incident reports about how people get harmed in these organizations, which we can then use to work with our customers to adjust the way they operate. So while still accomplishing the same impact, they can do so in the safest way possible and reduce the likelihood that someone will be harmed in their care. Through that approach, we've been able to reduce annual average drownings in YMCAs by, let's see, ooh. No. There we go, 84% year over year. And similarly, have been able to reduce incidents of child sexual abuse by 65%. I apologize for the formatting, never make a presentation on a Mac. And that's why we think insurance really can be such a powerful force for positive social change, because it arms us with this data that we can understand how bad things happen and use that to work with our customers to make sure they don't happen in their programs. So we believe insurance can be a powerful force for good, and what we also believe, along with all the consultants and industry insiders, is that insurance is about to get disrupted. If you were to create an industry that was ripe for disruption, it would probably look a lot like insurance. Insurance is big, it's behind the times digitally, and it's a place where customer experience has not been that great. So as a result, there have been billions of dollars invested in insurtech startups as folks line up to do to insurance what iTunes did to record stores, among many other examples. So it's a really interesting time to be in our shoes, and what's been interesting for us as we've looked at this disruptive wave headed our way is that the markets where a shared value approach is essential happen to be the markets where it's really unlikely that they're going to be hit by this initial wave of disruption. Because if you look at these startups, the places they're focused are on larger, high volume, pretty standardized market segments, things like renters insurance, life insurance, coverage for e-commerce sellers. And that makes sense. But if you use a shared value lens to find your place in the industry, it leads you to different kinds of markets. Markets that, because they cover some of our largest social problems, tend to feature customers who are a lot more complex, tend to be a bit smaller, and also bring with them a higher level of risk. So all these things make these markets really challenging, but at the same time, they also make them markets where it's unlikely someone's going to launch a new digital solution. And I think this is a lesson that can apply in any industry, that in a time of transformative change, oftentimes the most challenging markets are the safest place to be. So to give you just one other parallel example, if when Uber launched, you were in the business of providing transportation services to senior centers, you would have had a 5-year window before Uber started running pilots to serve your customers. Because this is a different kind of challenge, right? You've got, you need different vehicles with wheelchair lifts, you got customers who need more time or less comfortable with technology, and Uber had plenty of bigger fish to fry, right? So it buys you this invaluable amount of time to be able to adjust and adapt to the changes in the industry so that you can evolve and be able to succeed in the new reality that develops. And that's what we found to be true about our segments that we're in, providing insurance to youth-serving organizations. And what we think is particularly true of our newest segment, which is providing insurance for foster care agencies. And I want to take you into the world of foster care to give you a sense of the complexity of this work. And I think you'll agree that not only is it unlikely to be the place where someone's going to pilot a new digital insurance solution, but it's also a place where there's a tremendous amount of impact that it's really important that we have. So to introduce you to foster care, I want to ask you to think about childhood, because that's really what we're talking about, because that's what kids in foster care are experiencing. And I want to ask you to think about the kind of childhood that all of our kids deserve, that we'd want all of our kids to have, one that helps them grow up to become the best version of themselves. Because I think that helps to put in context what the experiences of kids in foster care can be like in the US. And I want to share some of those with you by sharing some real examples from a class action lawsuit that was brought in Texas on behalf of kids in the foster care system there. When we think about, we jumped ahead to the result of that lawsuit, but when we think about childhood, we might start with parents and family, right? The love and support we'd expect or want all kids to get from them. And it's important to remember that kids in foster care are in the foster care system because for some reason or another, their parents are not able to take care of them. So they start out from this incredibly vulnerable place, and it's important that we meet them there to understand what their experiences can be like from that point forward. When we think about childhood, we probably want all kids to have a nice place to call home and have the safety and support that they can always go back to there. And that makes it really hard to even imagine what it would have been like for the young girl in Texas who was moved 45 different times during her time in the foster care system. We'd hope for all kids to have wonderful friendships, to make great memories with their peers. Yet there's story after story in foster care of young kids being placed in dangerous situations with older children who have a history of acting out sexually. And even though we should have known better, are placed into situations where they're sexually abused and leave their time in the foster care system not with happy memories, but with nightmares. And we'd hope that all kids in their childhood would have adults they can count on. Trusted mentors who come through for them, who are there for them in the moments that matter. Which wasn't the case in the heartbreaking way that a young girl had 2 adoption attempts fall through, only because the state took too long to file the appropriate paperwork. So these experiences why the judge in this case concluded that Texas's foster care system is broken. And it has been that way for decades. Because so many kids who entered foster care ended up leaving it in a worse condition than when they started. And while these examples come from Texas, Texas is not the only place where this goes on. This is a challenge all across the country, and when we look at foster care outcomes across the US, we see some really challenging facts. Among the kids who age out of the foster care system in the US, less than 3% of them will go on to graduate from college. 71% of the women who age out of the foster care system in the US will become pregnant by the age of 21. And of the kids who reach 18 and age out of the foster care system, 1 in 5 of them will immediately become homeless because they don't have a safe place to go. So it's clear that we're not doing enough for our kids, especially these kids who are some of our most vulnerable. And I don't stand up here presuming for a second that insurance is some magical solution that is here to fix all this right away. This is a huge challenge, and any solution is going to have to be equally broad. We're going to need better funding for these organizations, to support caseworkers with more manageable caseloads, and to just invest more in families to begin with so there are fewer kids who have to end up going this route. All I'm here to say is that we think that insurance can be a part of the solution, and that this is the kind of challenge where we need all hands on deck working together to create a better future for our kids. And if we can use the data we collect to work with our customers, to make them safer, to make the kids in their care safer when they're in foster care, then we can be a small part of creating this better future for our kids. And if we're able to do that, we will have succeeded in a market where it's going to be safe for us to do where it's going to be safe for us to do that during a time where the industry around us is changing. And I'll just close with this, that for us, this threat of disruption is not why it's important that we do this shared value work. This shared value work is why it's important that we don't get disrupted in the first place. Because these challenges are big and they're not going away anytime soon. So if we want to be about creating better outcomes for kids, then we need to be able to be invested in this work for the long run. And the fact that this shared value model can both bring us to this work that really is worth doing, that it can provide us with the right kind of revenue in this transformative time in our industry so that we can continue doing it for the long run, is a pretty powerful thing. So I apologize for the PowerPoint mishaps, but I'm grateful to have the chance to share that story with you. And looking forward to learning with you more over the course of the rest of the day. Thank you.